Good afternoon and good evening. We'll let everybody enter on in and we'll get started in just a second. Quick audio check for everybody. And welcome aboard.
Good
It's hot.
evening.
All right, we'll give it another second or two and welcome. 8 o'clock Eastern, 7 o'clock Central. Or if you're recording, somewhere in between. This is going to be great tonight. This is a true privilege. And this is a gentleman who really needs no introduction, but certainly is doing the crisscrossing the country with myself from coast to coast to coast to coast. But a true, one of the two go-to names for dental and dental accounting. So to start off with a couple of introductions, welcome everybody. It is June 24th, and this is the first as part of the Navigate Business Services suite for Patterson. I'm joined with Trent Watrous, who
Mm,
is partner and segment leader at Aprio. So Trent comes with CPAs, CVAs, CFEs, leads Aprio's national dental practice business. And Trent, for those of you that haven't seen him before, is a very well-known business advisor, speaker to the industry, over a decade worth of experience working specifically with dental practices, which is critical in that space. Also, Trent oversees a team of 40 experienced accounting professionals actively serving owners and practitioners in every life stage of their career. So we're going to talk tax,
mm.
auditing, forensic accounting, expert witness, and certainly educator and coaching dental clients through the most complex of financial challenges. So, Trent, thank you so much, sir. Greatly appreciated, and thanks for joining us.
Well, I'm glad I get to, and I often look, Eric, at the number of practices that you have been involved with, and I think when it comes to exposure, I think you've got how many thousand practices now that you all have negotiated
We
leases for?
Yeah, it's we were just pulling that up the other day, and actually we've got some new software now that actually
Uh-huh.
tracks it all. We've got over 20,000 dental leases we have
Wow.
historically, and then over 13,000 completed projects.
Wow. That's experience. That's knowledge brought to the table. When I think of Cirrus, that's the kind of depth that always associate with your team. Very, very impressive.
Well, appreciate it, Trent. And so, guys, tonight's a little bit of a different format for tonight's CEs. First of all, we'll do a quick little poll and customize it. So, conflict of interest disclosure. I own Cirrus Consulting Group, and we will process the CEs with roughly 10 business days from today. And we're going to keep things really interactive. So, in the chat, feel free to post roughly what part of the continent you're coming in from tonight. And the Q&As are open. We'll cover some of those as we go. So if there's some specific tax questions, some specific transition questions, financing questions for Trent, some specific issues about the space, landlords, leases, those sorts of things, we'll cover on the way as we go as well. So we're going to do this as a little different format for tonight. Where we're going to get into some consolidated questions. We're going to have some good conversations because some of the great feedback we've received is, hey, less slides, more good conversations about today's top issues. Speaking of today's top issues, this is one, really interesting component that has been shared now throughout the country that goes through a recent ADA study that showed, looking over the next 6 months, what are the top three biggest challenges facing your dental practice? So, from the respondents, workforce issues, as Trent and I were just talking about, hiring, recruiting, training, retaining staff, 63.2%. Remarkable. Insurance reimbursement, delayed,
Mm,
denied payment, right? Differences from production collections, especially as Trent goes through and helps to analyze values of clinics, etc., seeing money that you're already working for not getting paid can be absolutely brutal.
mm.
And then, thirdly is overhead. And that's something that we're seeing across the board. As there's inflation, as there's rising expenses, as there's, all these sorts of things, it's a funny and an interesting conversation. And Trent, I'll pass it to you here to sort of touch on everything you see as you're advising your clients and you're going through annual tax returns personally and corporately. But its overhead's interesting. When we see usually supplies and whatnot, you're 5%, 5.5% maybe from the dental suppliers. Equipment, right? Obviously from time to time as need be. And rent, we see upwards of 8.32%. But it's interesting. Most doctors think, hey, I'll just, I'll beat up my rep to see if I can save, an extra
Hmm.
2 or 3 points on cups and gauze and hand pieces. Yet, all in all, the tenancy expense continues to rise exponentially.
Hmm.
So, Trent, maybe from what you're seeing these days across all of your clients across the country here, give us your perspective of what you're seeing from top challenges facing your clients today.
I would say, hands down, number one would be labor, because we are in a period of low unemployment. So the demand for labor is high, which drives up wages. So what we are seeing are more clients investing in their offices to get a great feel for those employees to have a wonderful place to work to help drop turnover. Secondly, I would say that practices are asking a whole lot about leases. I jokingly say to clients, your lease expense is not your largest expense, it's just your longest. So let's get it right. Because if you get it wrong from the get go, you got a long time to wait it out. Um, People are feeling a lot of pressure on their lease issues because if they want to expand or they need to relocate, it kind of becomes a burden. Third thing I would say, and of the three, would be patient pressures. And it's in a period of rising inflation, it's just helping patients see the importance of their oral health care, helping them see why they need the treatment, why to take care of it now, making the most of the patient's paying ability, whether that's through insurance or private pay, so that the maximum revenue can be gathered. So I'd say those are probably the top three right now.
Hmm. And that boils down to patient acceptance, new patients
Hmm.
walking through the front door,
That's right.
and then
It,
looking through who's doing it now versus who's kicking the can down the road.
that's right. That's right. How we approach having everyone come into the space and feel the value of the oral healthcare provider really helps case acceptance.
Perfect. So we want to customize it tonight, guys. We're keeping this very conversational, not too many, slides or otherwise. So we've just pulled up a quick entrance poll. Please take a quick second. That's helpful for Trent and I to help customize to what stage of career you're at. From accounting perspectives, leasing versus owning spaces. Are you planning to open? Are you planning to transition? Because obviously, the big theme for tonight is how do we help to build more profit in preparation for that sale? And it really boils down to proactive investment versus reactive cost. And so, what we really, first of all, doctors, if nobody's pat you or pat yourself on the back for going through what has been probably the most difficult 5 years in an entrepreneur's life, right?
Mm-hmm.
You've got a global pandemic, and God knows that wasn't easy, right? You've got rising inflation, we've got global socioeconomic politics. You've got, all sorts of tax changes. You've got some of the largest staffing changes and challenges as there's never been before. So again, if nobody's pat you on the back, the fact that you're spending some time on a a Tuesday evening here to help
Yeah.
get a little bit of additional information, then you're thinking towards the exit. And if you're thinking of selling between yesterday and 10 years from now, this is absolutely the course for you because between Trent and I, we've talked to thousands and thousands of doctors. Our objectives now is to help share some key pearls and key best practices. There's no hidden agenda or otherwise. We just want to do and share as much as we can in advance, let you know the resources that are out there, because there are some really big traps, and there are certainly some tax strategies that, if you go to Trent and say, look, hey, I've just I've become disabled, or heaven forbid, my spouse just passed away and we've got to sell the clinic tomorrow, right? There's some big misses that can be done. So the more things we can do today to help prepare for the future, the better. So we'll give it an extra minute. In terms of quick introductions for Cirrus, pretty unique, right? We've had a similar coverage. We covered the entire continent in North America. The unique point for us is, we're never paid for by the landlord. So there's never that inherent conflict of interest that you may have with that, local broker that's getting paid a percentage of how much you're spending, right? Which isn't a problem. It's just how that world works, right? And then, certainly lawyers, God bless them. There's lots of great ones out there. But certainly, as it pertains to where we've created a unique niche for us over the past 31 years in business, are to help advise doctors on the uniqueness of a dental build out, a uniqueness of a dental renewal, having the specific data and rental rates, vacancies, comp reports, all those sorts of things are absolutely key. So data is key, and we'll spend some time
Mhm.
touching on that today because when looking at, as Trent mentioned, your rent multiplied by the annual increase, multiplied by the 10-year term, it's remarkable how much of a cost and investment you're spending through to today. So I'll give it another second here, but Trent, just a quick little background for you. So roughly a little over 72% lease versus own.
Okay.
So that's good from a tax planning perspective
Mhm.
for you. There is roughly 9% are planning to open or relocate the clinic,
Okay.
62% planning to transition or sell within the next 5 years, right? No great surprise.
Okay.
21% plan to stay where they are, and then a few for the none of the above. So
Okay.
great.
Good.
And then
Good insight.
yeah, in terms of time frame, leases expiring anywhere from 2 years, 5 years, over 5 years, etc. And yeah, I think from this perspective, 91% own one single location, Trent. Uh,
Okay.
and then roughly about 9% are 2 to 5 locations. Perfect. Great.
All right.
So yeah, Trent, maybe from that perspective, we'll go through some good examples here, and I'll stop sharing because again, we really wanted to keep this pretty conversational across the board. So, Trent, let's look at things from a high level, from a big picture. So,
Okay.
what do you see as one of the top hidden challenges or blind spots that dentists are facing today, especially as it pertains to tax and the practice transition process?
The lack of planning, and you get up, Eric, to the desired exit date, and there's so many, burrs, thorns that are out there. One of them, largest, would probably be the lack of knowledge of the value of the practice and what could have driven that value. The second, I would say, would be a surprise that a lease brings. And the third would be the lack of profit. When a practice doesn't have profitability, and let me give you the irony of it so we can hold this one kind of out as a discussion.
Hmm.
Somebody says, you know what, I've always beat the tax man, and my numbers have always been where I've just avoided tax. And you're like, well, now you're demonstrating that your practice is not profitable. So there is something to be said with paying some tax. So, in that light, let's make the most of our expenses so that we're preparing for that exit date and that we can show that potential buyer this practice has cash flow. That makes sense?
Yeah, it's an interesting piece, Trent, because for yourself specifically, you're getting involved with both more than most. Traditionally, you'll have a, accountant that is there, you're right, throughout the doctor's life to make them look as poor and
Mm-hmm.
unprofitable as possible. And then
Right.
typically you'll have a practice broker that's there obviously to show how amazing it is and how profitable and successful you are. So, a personal question is how do you juggle between the two hats?
Here's what we do. We meet a lot of people on the road of transitions as they're beginning. Let's say sometimes 1 year out or less, and then it's 5 years out. And it's time that you come clean with your numbers and you make your numbers be the best reflection of the economic activity. Don't put personal expenses in the practice. Don't try to dodge revenue here and there. Make the practice be what it is and plan for that exit moment. That may be expanding into some new equipment. You can get the deduction of Section 179. It may be negotiating for more lease space or the option for it so that the next buyer says, wow, when you negotiated this lease, you also got this chance to expand, which then helps drive value. Make the business, because you've got the prep time, be as prepared for that moment of sale as it can be. Don't always worry about beating out the tax man because the tax guy is going to get his money. The second thing that I would put along those lines about taxes would be know the value of your practice. I know you're 5, 6, 7 years away, but do you know what your practice is worth? And do you know what drives that value? I find it very interesting that when you get to the transition point, people say, I have no idea what my practice is worth. And then after we go through the process, they're like, if I had only known, you're like, if you'd only know.
So I'll remind, feel free to post any, chat and or Q&A that's open here as we go, guys. We want to keep this key. A couple of my key questions on both of those. Profit, Trent. Again, some good tangible best practices that the doctor can do today. I've heard of a few.
Okay.
Part of it is, rethinking of technology and investments, right? If I'm doing
Hmm.
more than 5 crowns per month, hey, does it make sense to add a milling machine type thing, right? Where are my lab costs? What can I do to keep more revenue in-house? That's one. The other one we hear of is, again, what other revenue is coming through your doors are you referring out? Can you bring in a orthodontist, an OMS once a month or otherwise? Can we do
Hmm.
more in-house, right, with the revenue split versus referring out and never seeing anything back type thing? Those are a few of the little things I've picked up over the years, but specifically to profit, Trent, what are some other good, again, I'm 10 years out, I'm 5 years out. What are some other key things I can do today to
Okay.
drive that profitability, to increase my EBITDA, to increase my multiple and valuation, etc.?
And the first thing I would say is time has got to be on your side. The longer that you take to prepare for your exit strategy, the better off you're going to be. Don't wait till you've got 2 years. Eric, what I believe you're doing at Cirrus for your clients is so vitally important because you're helping them prepare. It could be 15 years out. That lease is so important to profitability today and the exit strategy down the road. So if you think of time, that lease is critical. The second thing would be, you're going to say something?
Nope,
Yeah.
nope, keep going. Yeah.
Okay. Second thing I would be is think about your top line. Before you get down into the expenses, the largest number on any P&L is the top line. So if you can move the largest number X%, then you impact the financial statement in its greatest moment. I find it surprising how few practitioners really understand their payer mix, most common procedures, and their rates that they charge their patients. Dentistry is just a rate times volume game. So if you can increase patients, great. If you can increase rates, great. But if you can increase both, thumbs up. That's the big. So start out with that top line. Are you regularly increasing your fees? Because that's going to drive EBITDA on that bottom line. Do you know what brings patients in the door to your practice? And are you continuing to do that? Do you know why people choose to do business with you? You want to be able to express that.
It's an interesting piece, rates, right? And we've done some great courses with some great speakers and rates. Trent, if you could look across maybe the doctors that come to you or your guests, how many do you feel are underbilling from what they should or could in terms of, without losing patients or again, doing more for less, etc. The billing piece, right? And then part two of that is, what would you say to the doctor who's sitting on tonight thinking, ah, well, that might be me, but I'm gun shy about, increasing my fees.
Okay. The first thing I would say, your first question was, what volume, I guess, do I see? I believe it's probably up 60 to 70% easy of the doctors that we meet in a discussion will admit I've not increased my fees. I've not renegotiated my insurance rates. Why? You pay more for milk at the store, you pay more for bread at the store, you pay more for gas, clothes, travel. Your patients, customers, already know the concept of inflation. Value the trust that they have in you and adjust those fees. Don't be ashamed of the value that you bring to those customers, aka patients. Secondly, understand why someone comes in your door. It's because your knowledge and your relationship. Make the decisions that echo that, that drive that. And when you choose to undervalue your services and they pay more for other items, they're actually kind of beginning to see you as maybe not as qualified. It's a consumer perception matter. Um, do what you can to manage the store, increase those rates periodically, and trust in that relationship that you have with your patients. Does that make sense, Eric?
It
Now,
does,
I,
because
I, I do want to stress one concept. Be the captain of your destiny. Do things like manage the top line, keep business business and personal personal. Keep your personal expenses out of your business. Take the time to go through your P&L and know why you start out with the top line and end up with the bottom line. Look at your numbers and delve into, I know what I'm paying. It doesn't mean you have to squeeze a nickel till it's a penny. It means, are you investing your money through expenses in what brings value to your patients? That makes sense?
it does. So, digging into that a little further, at what stage, again, other than yesterday, but at what stage, if you're an early career doctor, right, at what stage do you want to start dabbling into that? At what stage, and then sort of going through the spectrum? So maybe start there. Early career doctor. What are some key practical tidbits and practical advice you give to that early stage career doctor?
Without a doubt, it's I tell my young clients, you're bright, you're smart, you learned how to drill the middle of a tooth and not hurt the patient, very sophisticated. You can learn business skills. Align yourself with a business advisor, a trusted that will teach you, not make you dependent on them, teach you how to read a P&L, how to understand a balance sheet. Understand your numbers. If you follow me online, you'll hear me say it pays to know your numbers. Understand what's in your financial statements. I want young dentists to understand that they can't separate their future wealth from their practice. Those two are inexplicably linked together. So make decisions about your future with your practice, not separate. Know that what goes on in your practice when you're a young practitioner is going to create that future wealth for you down the road. If you jump to the middle of the life of a practice versus maybe the third being retirement age or senior doctor, time is on your side when you're young. Ask yourself in the middle of your career, am I objectively doing the things that I need to do to make my next stage the greatest success? And that's again, be the CEO, be the CFO of your practice. Ask questions. Understand. When you move to that upper level, that last level, are you preparing for that exit strategy in matters like your lease, in matters like your technology. Don't wait till the last minute. Enjoy your profession by investing back into practice and being prepared. Let me ask you this. When you see the three stages in your experience, what mistakes have you seen where people waited too long? Eric?
It's an interesting point, and I was actually just pulling this up based on some of the survey results and looking at where you more specifically, is spending some key time. Let me move this up and can you see? Hang on, let me try this one more time. You should be able to see a full screen here, Trent, and a nice little spot in beautiful Nashville, Tennessee.
There you go.
So, I mean, I think across all stages, but especially the early stage doctor or the seller, as they need to start thinking about it through the eyes of the buyer, is the value of the dollar. And it sounds a little cliche, but part of this is looking at it through the other person's eyes, looking at it through the patient's eyes, at it through, if this is your first clinic, looking at it from a value per dollar, dollar per square foot, um, as well as, things like demographics and the business case and the business plan. God knows to open a business and get a loan in any industry
Mm,
other than dental is, you're going through the back door with the pigs and the chickens, right? Especially myself included. But as a dentist, right, there's specific lending teams, as Trent, you oversee, that do nothing but have dental teams that know the specific usage of the dentist and can provide a ton of value. So, in other words, cash flow. Cash flow can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people, but ultimately, what's left in the bank account at the end of the day? So the way we look at it, and so many doctors that we talk to, regardless of the stage of the career, but especially the early stage, oh well, I was told, my landlord told me it was only going to be, $42 a square foot. Yeah, that doesn't sound too bad.
mm.
But actually, doctor, have you pulled out the calculator and figured out how much that represents coming out of your bank account in the next 5 to 10 years? So, doctors, if you can see my screen, this was just a real simple example that I pulled out of the sky here this evening. Live, active, right? Space for lease. I've adjusted some of the numbers here just to illustrate a unique purpose. But ultimately, this is the type of stuff that you want to work with your team on to figure out, hey, what does that year one rent look like? And oh, by the way, I can't tell you how many times doctors might not realize that there's this thing called CAM, common area maintenance, or taxes, maintenance, and insurance that are not just $41 per square foot, but additional fees that the landlord passes on, including the property taxes, right? The landlord's maintenance and any other fees that the landlord incurs that they can pass on. So the way that we look at it is, that one little binding letter of intent that you sign on the trunk of a proverbial car actually represents a check, the largest check that you will sign in your professional or personal career, which just in the first 10 years is over $900,000. And when we look across averages of a 26 and a half years that the average doctor's in the same location, that easily can be upwards. 5,000 a month, increasing at 3% per year over 30 years can easily be $2.9 million over 30 years. Therefore, part of this is how do we look at this a little differently? So when we talk about cost, and this is, going into a little bit about how the sausage is made, but it's helpful because look, it's all about variables. As you said before, it's it's all about the procedures and mix and
Mhm.
billings. Well, if we look at the square footage, we look at a 10-year term, we look at $42 a month per square foot per year, 3% annual increase, plus another $12 for your triple net, meaning taxes, maintenance,
Mhm.
and insurance. Without anything else in, that's your $910,000. But it is
Mm.
truly remarkable where, where do you spend your time or where can you properly negotiate? And isn't this interesting? Just looking at saving a buck or two per square foot and a couple of months worth of free rent, as you can see here, we're almost $50,000 to the good for this one opportunity in Nashville here to, dramatically have an impact in savings in EBITDA because every dollar that you spend, right, it's not just a dollar of production to pay for
Mm.
it, right? You've now got to
Yeah,
pay everything else, and it actually, depending on what your profitability is, it could be $10, right? Can be $10 worth of work in order to, right, have that equivalent of saving that additional dollar in some of your overhead expenses.
I think what you've just shown is a powerful example of having knowledge of your numbers, Eric. You can't assume that someone else is going to mind the store. Look at that cumulative difference of what you're going to spend over time, but what else is out there in that light that you're just not aware of? You got to be aware of what's in your numbers.
So I'll add a couple of more tidbits here that we've continually figured out over 31 years in business is
Mhm.
it's interesting, Trent. You said it before. Ultimately, the doctor is the best tenant on the planet. You've got some of the highest build out costs, bar none. Downtown Nashville, easily 300, 350 per square foot, construction alone, plus equipment, plus. You're $1 million before you've seen your first patient, let alone delays, permits, zoning, you name it. But you're the best tenant on the planet. Highest build out cost, lowest default rates. The
Mhm.
likelihood of a dentist defaulting is less than 0.5%. And
Mhm.
Trent, I know you're all dentistry, but take a guess now in the restaurant business, Trent, default rates for restaurants on their lease.
I would think that's got to be between 40 and 60%.
So, interestingly enough, it is, and we've seen it consistently, some national stats. These were pre-COVID numbers, but it was over 92%.
Is that right?
So, again,
Mm.
look at it from the landlord's perspective. I mean, look around your local neighborhoods. How many tenants were there 10, 15, 20 years ago, right?
Hmm.
Yet alone that one dentist in that corner unit, boy, oh boy, that's been there for 25, 30 odd years. So plus you're COVID proof, you can't work from home regardless of what your staff says. So ultimately you are the best tenant on the planet, yet doctors, ask yourself, why do, to this day, 54% of dentists overpay in rent?
Mm.
Trent, I'll put you on the spot. Why? Why do you think dentists, they're the best tenants on the planet, why do you think they get stuck paying the highest rents?
Uh, Very easily concluded from my perspective. It's the lack of attention to detail. It because dentists generally do so well financially, they don't feel the pain. So they're leaving money on the table.
That's an interesting perspective because you're right. We sort of call it a little bit of dental guilt, which is,
Mm.
well, gosh, I've done well. I've earned my keep. We've had good patients. The landlord's been pretty good to us, type of thing, which is relative. Uh, yeah, but yeah, I guess we've had some pretty good years. Oh, shoot, I guess the landlord wants a 15% increase. Well, boy, we couldn't have done it without this space. And boy, I certainly don't want to have the stress and pressure of trying to pick up and relocate. Oh, shoot, I'll just sign off to it.
Hmm. Yeah.
So, yeah, that's definitely a big one. That sort of guilt, attention to detail. Part of it is just timing. On average, the best time, Trent, to start the renewal negotiations for an average doctor renewing every 5 years is typically at least 2 years prior to lease expiry. Why? Because the landlord knows
Wow.
it's 18 to 24 months to relocate.
Yeah.
When do you think, Trent, and this is a little anecdotal, but when do you think the average client starts the renewal negotiations?
Uh, I would think probably 11 to 15 months.
If I told you 2 months.
Is it really?
And maybe it's because, we do get too many calls all too often that the landlords do not proactively remind the doctor when it is their option to
Sure.
renew deadline. So one of the big reminders and another great pearl to put into your phones tonight is when does your lease expire? And most importantly, when is your option to renew deadline, which
Mm,
typically is between 6 or 12 months prior to your lease expiry, which the landlord puts in there to say, well, look, if you're not going to stay, give me some time. I don't want to be stuck, without much time. So, look, you need to give me notice in advance if you don't plan to renew, right? But by the way, if you don't tell me in time, your remaining two 5-year options become null and void.
right.
So, and then the landlord can put whatever new standard form lease in front of them. They can put whatever new financial rates. They can put literally whatever they want. And you've got 2 months before your lease expires. What are you going to do?
Yeah.
That, Trent, is the biggest reason why so many doctors overpay in rent. Other pieces are, in many cases, a new doctor opening their first clinic gets things called a tenant improvement allowance or a
Hmm.
TIA. That sounds great, and in some cases it is great. Wow, Trent, my landlord is going to kick in and give me 20 bucks per square foot. I'm going to get 50 grand of money for the landlord because, hey, every time I put some plumbing in, electrical, and anything affixed to the premises and walls and whatnot, that's the landlord's asset. And the
Hmm.
landlord's going to pay me for it. But be cautious, right? I would much rather the client go to Aprio, etc., right? Get connected with the right lending institution and get an extra 50,000 line of credit or part of the practice acquisition loan or build out loan than to remind yourself that landlords are not in the lending business,
Nope.
right? The
Nope.
last thing the landlords typically want to do is to, right, take cash from other options, front it to a tenant. And of
Hmm.
course, where's that money coming from? And where's it going to get baked into? We're looking at it right now. So if you can still see my screen, you should be able to see base rents, annual increases, and common area maintenance are just three of the main components as to what front loads the lease, which then increases how much you spend over the average 10 years. And
Yep.
then most doctors, for those that have renewed many times, which I think over 83% of the clients have on the line, at year 10 it states, "Oh, you will then be at the ever greater than." Right? So basically you're on the world's most boring roller coaster, right? That keeps on going up and up and up and up and up.
Yeah.
So right? Just understanding some of those key pieces. We're throwing a lot of pearls at you, but just having a good understanding for some of those components or taking a screenshot of this, it can certainly provide a ton of great information and reiterating how much you can squeeze from that lemon. Because
Yeah.
again, you are such a great tenant. You are such a value add to the landlord. And trust me, these days, when it's quite frankly, because of interest rates or otherwise, it's, in my opinion, a better time to be a tenant than it is to be a landlord. So
Mm.
therefore, we've seen three recently where either the landlord, one of our 5-star Google reviews in Boston, we secured $293,000 without any increase in base rent or annual increase. In another case in California, we were able to get the landlord to cover the entire build-out costs because they were sick of nail salons and hair salons and whatnot and really wanted some good, solid tenancy.
Wow. I tell you what, I want you to spend just a couple minutes, Eric, on that common area maintenance.
Hmm. So cam fees are interesting. There's a great article we did recently for Oral Health Magazine. I could probably pull it up pretty quickly, but in summary, common area maintenance is interesting because it is this sort of surprise and estimated amount, and there's some
Mm.
true ups at the end of the year. I'm sure you see it in all the
Yeah.
financial statements. But CAM is negotiable. I think that's the big takeaway. CAM is negotiable, meaning that everyone thinks when I negotiate my rent, and I renegotiate my renewal, I think of the first half of the first page, right? Is it in my name personally or the corporate name,
Hmm.
right? What's the base rent? What's the term? And maybe what's the annual increase? Yet there's another 76 and a half other pages of stuff in there, right, that doesn't get focused on. Common area maintenance is one of them. Part of it is most doctors are shocked to know what the heck is in it, right? What am I actually paying for? And am I getting any value for it? So now it becomes a little bit of what's reasonable versus unreasonable. So just a couple of high level tips. And I think I've got a couple of slides in there as well. But
Okay.
needless to say, at a high level, part of it is this. Part of it is the impact of the annual increases of common area maintenance. If the landlord's increasing their expenses, if property taxes, we saw it in New York, property taxes go through the moon,
Mm-hmm.
that's a challenge. So the most and one of the most important things we can do now is to help ensure that there's a limit as to how much those annual increases can occur. Number two are things like amortization and whatnot. And in this case, we're not referring to it necessarily as a Trent accounting piece, but more so if the landlord is redoing a roof or redoing the parking lot, etc., are
Mm-hmm.
you, and there's three tenants in there and it costs 100 grand, are you going to have to pay $33,000 as a surprise at the end of that year? Even though
Mm.
the landlord, right, is going to find their own way and accountants are going to spread it out over the
Right.
useful life. So, hey, if they're spreading it out over the useful life on their books, why shouldn't you as well?
Sure.
That's an interesting component. Then there's things like exclusions. Why am I paying for legal fees or brokerage fees for that vacant space at the other end of the mall? Right? Why is that my problem? Why am I paying a management fee, which could be for
Mm-hmm.
the landlord's spouse or otherwise, that could go from maybe 5% is reasonable, but why am I paying 15% type thing?
Mm-hmm.
So there can be exclusions, there can be common area maintenance caps, there can be amortization periods, or even things like audit rates. We saw an example not too long ago in Colorado where the CAM fees were skyrocketing year over year over year. Well, we negotiated some audit rates for the doctor. Doctor went back with their CPA, got some information, looked at some of those source invoices,
Yeah.
found out that lo and behold, after a little digging, their snow removal fee was doubling and doubling and doubling. And
Well.
surely there wasn't doubling in snow. After some digging, it turned out it was actually one of the family. It was the brother-in-law who actually owned the snow removal business, and the tenants were basically funneling through, right, to the
Right.
family money. So CAM is a really interesting one and one that typically does get overlooked.
I want to pose one other question out there to you that we've seen in some practice transitions that have been a snag, and I want your input. When the most recent lease was negotiated, there wasn't assignability.
Yeah, that's another interesting one. So, assignment provisions. Let's touch on that a
Hmm.
little bit. I've got a little example here I can actually jump ahead to. Uh,
Okay.
let me see. Let me know when you can see my screen. So, assignment. Assignment's an interesting one because when you do get a practice appraisal, one of the first pieces that they'll look at beyond the financials and profitability and those sorts of things are, right? What are the potential risks to the buyer?
Hmm.
And or what are the mechanics that are going to be necessary in order to get the practice sold? So, Trent, from your perspective on a sale, typically there'll be conditions that the merger and acquisition attorneys will do that, hey, it's conditional upon the buyer getting financing and the
Hmm.
successful assignment of the lease.
Right.
And most will say, it's the lease. Yeah, yeah, we'll figure it out when we get there. But ultimately, or most doctors say, well, why is the lease such a big deal for a sale? I mean, now look at it from the perspective of the landlord, or more harshly, what is your clinic worth without the keys?
Mm.
Right? Now, suddenly, it's a different conversation, Trent, with you and the team to suddenly say, well, hey, what are my charts worth?
Yeah.
Versus what could I actually sell for my six operatory clinic that's producing 1.2 million per year. So to your point on the assignment is one, obviously your team and practice brokers from coast to coast to coast to coast run into because landlords now, especially in down times, are running into the scenarios where they're suddenly finding out, wait a second, right? That guy, that gal is selling your clinic for how much?
Mm.
And who's coming in? And how do I know they're going to pay the rent at the same perspective? And by the way, I was giving that person, again, a sweetheart deal
Hmm.
because They were a good tenant, they paid their rent on time, etc. But now they're about to sell, and I'm not okay with that. So ultimately, the landlord has put in language
Okay.
specifically to control whom you can sell to and when. And ultimately, the landlord wants to keep as much control with that as possible. So, for those that have already been reading through it, let's look through some of the red flags here in this one little section. Well, first and foremost, Trent, as you know firsthand, the doctor cannot sell the clinic without the prior written consent of the landlord. Full stop. If you don't, if it's not assigned, if it's not transferred, etc., if it's some sort of a handshake napkin type thing, the landlord absolutely can hold you in
Mm.
default and terminate the lease and all sorts of other nasty stuff. The other interesting piece reading along is what happens next? Well, the landlord, and this clause with some of these issues are in over 75% of leases. So if you haven't looked through your lease lately, I can hear some proverbial searching through some digital documents. But just for asking, the landlord can come back a week, a month, a year later and say either thumbs up, right? Dr.
Mhm.
Watchers, good stuff, good guy, right? Nice guy from Nashville, and thumbs up, approved. Or number two, declined. No, don't like that blue shirt, not interested. Or
Mm.
number three, just for asking, the landlord can terminate the lease upon the date that you were about to close and engage
Wow.
directly with your buyer. So these are just some of the main pieces hidden away
Hmm.
in Article 76, subsection 2, and in some cases, it's not even listed as assignment. So, but it can absolutely imagine after working through, you get the practice valuation done, you get all the lawyers, the buying, the selling, right? Everything's done, you're all set to close, and suddenly the landlord says, no, or what we had at one of our recent courses in Las Vegas was the landlord went back to the buyer and said, "By the way, how much you paying for this thing?" Well,
Mm.
about $1 million. What? The landlord says you're paying him $1 million. I got the space, right? What are you paying for? Well, I don't know, the chairs, the charts and whatnot. He's like, look, I got a fully built in space. Do the deal with me. The doctor's lease is coming up in a year. I'll come. I'll give you a new lease. Pay me an extra 10%. Right? I'll do a deal directly with you. Right? So the landlord essentially almost cut out right the seller through the entire process. So
Wow.
so these are the type of things that could obliterate 100% of those practice value.
Mhm.
The other big one, in the essence of time, are looking for the word consideration. If you see consideration, read on, right? Or get some help. Because if there's language that states that if you are receiving any sort of cash, goods, any sort of money in conjunction with the sale of your business, the landlord has added language here that basically states that other than your equipment, trade fixtures, inventory, goodwill, etc., is owed to the landlord. Meaning, if, and this exact section was pulled from a national landlord's lease. So, what it's saying is, in other words, is a creative way of saying basically, look, anything that is, if you're getting a practice valuation, it shows that's $175,000 is going towards the leaseholds or your location, the walls, the plumbing, the electrical, the front desk, right, the staff room,
Mhm.
etc, right? If that's $175,000, the landlord says, that's my money, right? I want that $175,000 because look at the valuation. That's what it is.
Yeah.
And lastly, and probably the number one reason why a practice deal dies at the 11th hour is the one section that states that, unfortunately, doctor, even though you are have sold your clinic, even though you've now retired, you've moved down to Florida, you've enjoyed the best of life. By the way, you will still remain as personally and corporately liable as long as that lease continues to renew indefinitely. And this, Trent, to your point, is by far the biggest. Whoa, whoa, whoa. What?
Yeah.
That was my best Trent accent, right? But wait a second, right? Hold the bus. How am I still supposed to be as liable as I am today,
Hmm.
long after I'm sold? Right? The landlord says, "Look, I don't know the new guy, but right, I want to make sure that I've got as many hooks as possible. And hey, you're getting the 2 million bucks on your practice sale. I just want to make sure that the landlord, I'm going to get paid and going to get my end."
Mm.
So the assignability is key. And this is just as important for the now 27% of you who own your building, because this is the section, this one little clause can impact hundreds of thousands of dollars to the practice sale. Now, Trent, you're a practice valuation expert, and obviously Aprio handles thousands of these things per year. Uh, some of your other key best practices and other things to really look out for long in preparation to the sale.
First thing is if you've got an associate, what is their contract going to be like for the next practice owner? Do you have a non-compete clause? Do you have a non-solicitation clause? Two different kinds of clauses, both have contractual obligations. Can can someone buy the practice and the associate walk? Well, now you've got a goodwill issue that's going to negatively impact it. Um, what you've just covered from the landlord side is a significant impact that concerns us. We just had a case in California where the deal was held up about 4 months. The landlord just would not approve the transaction. We were patient, had to really tap dance. Ultimately, we got it without a major penalty, but the transaction nearly fell apart because of that. Know when to invest in your real estate, when to make major improvements, and when to leave as is. Sometimes when folks spend a lot of money, maybe 1 year or less before walking out the door to a retirement, they spend a lot of money thinking that will change the practice when it does not. So their cash is gone, but the value wasn't associated with it. Um, those would be the primaries that we see from a transitions standpoint.
Got it. The other one again is timing. So the options. I'll do this as one final little case study example here, but this is one where in 90% of leases. So you might think, oh, Eric, I've got, 1 5-year option, I've got 2 5-year options, etc. This is an example out of Texas where, this one little clause, which stated that provided that Dr. Joe Black shall remain as the tenant,
Mm,
right? So that's great for Dr. Joe Black. Dr. Joe Black had 2 5-year renewals. Unfortunately, not good for Dr. Smith, who's about to buy the clinic, right? With only 1 year technically available for Dr. Smith, Dr. Black is the one that has the term. So if the options are personal to you, major red flag. Number two,
mm,
making sure that you've never been in default and lots of issues through COVID or otherwise, or minimal hours of operation. If you're next to a big box store, etc., the landlords want you to be open and lit. And there's all sorts of things, even including lack of a cure period or otherwise. So there's all
mm,
sorts of little snags that if the landlord really wants to make it difficult, they can make it really difficult. Any such renewal shall be on the landlord's standard form lease. Well, that obliterates all the value that you've done from negotiating the previous lease if the landlord can put whatever they want in front of you, including crazy stuff like a relocation clause that means that the landlord can move you at any time to any other unit,
yeah.
or that they can put a demolition clause, there's little 6 months worth of notice, and you're out regardless of how long you have in term and options. And then again, of course, in no event is it less. Now, this was one example we got recently, which is the last, again, big pearl. don't get this letter by reminding yourself and starting the process and get some professional assistance. As you
Mm,
know, your lease expires on X. Pursuant to Section 2.4 of your lease, you had an option to renew the lease for at least 5 years at market rate. However, you're required to give me written notice of your intention to renew by not later than 6 months prior to the expiration of your current term. By my calculation, you were required to give this written notice no later than, right, Friday, which you did not do. And this was Monday morning. Please be advised that my broker will be placing a for lease sign in a conspicuous but non-intrusive place on the premises this week. They put it on the front door, right? And the staff suddenly said, "Hey, boss, Doc, what's going on?" Oh, I don't know. We only moved in 4 years ago, right? And oh, by the way, he'll only show the premises to prospective tenants during business hours, right? And attempt not to contact or he will attempt to contact your office prior to showing. Of
mm,
course, oh, by the way, if you do want to stay, have your people call my people, right?
mm.
It's such a frustrating piece that these things can be a challenge. The last sort of cautionary word of warning, personal client of mine, this was her five-star Google review, and basically 74 years of age, tried to sell her clinic 3 separate times. Each time, the landlord refused to allow her to transfer and assign the lease. So luckily, we did find a space that was north, and the landlord covered all the build-out costs. But the big takeaway here is understanding how important, and imagine being 74
Mm.
years of age and having to build out a new clinic from scratch just to extract the value from the clinic.
Wow.
So, in summary, and then we'll go to some Q&A here, ultimately start the process early. This is a clock. This is what they teach landlords. And for the uh, 20 odd percent of landlords or dentists that own their own real estate, this is the piece where this is
Hmm.
how landlords are taught how to increase their profit without a penny of additional expense. And think of it as just little clocks, right? And hands on the clock. And the further that they can stall, delay, deflect, defer, the more leverage, the higher the rents, and the more that the doctor gets stuck.
Yeah.
So in summary, giving summarizing some of these big pearls. Number one is understand all the information. No different from the practice analysis. Get all your documentation in alignment. Ironically, Trent said attention to detail is one of the biggest impacts to practice value devaluation. I wouldn't disagree, which is ironic considering the profession. But ultimately, getting all the documentation, making sure it's signed by you and by the landlord. So many doctors have things that are signed by one, it's not worth the paper it's written on. Do you have the original lease from 1986? And then when it got sold to Dr. Smith, and then when you bought it from Dr. Smith in 1996, right? Do you have all that information? Have you really identified those practice and career goals? When do I want to transition? What do I want the legacy to be? What do I want to do afterwards? Do I want to stay on as an associate? Number three,
Mm.
review those office leases for risks and issues. Number four is prepare the market research, right? That absolutely is critical. So understand rental rates, vacancies, comp report.
Mm.
Ask yourself, when was the last time you compared your rent to market?
Mm.
Then section five is figure out that carefully choreographed game of chess first. What have I not done at this point, Trent? I haven't picked up the phone and called the landlord. So please, doctors, do not go in tomorrow morning and say, "Great, great, Mr.
Mm.
Landlord. Hey, I know my lease is coming up in a year and a half. How much are you going to charge me?" Right? And skip those sections 1 through 5. Get the help, get the analysis, get it done right. Number six is then negotiate the financial components, then negotiate the business clauses, and do not stop
Yeah.
until you get to a final form lease that you're satisfied with.
What a great process, Eric. So thorough. So thorough.
So, we'll go to some questions here. Again, it's certainly an appreciation of everyone's time. What we will do, if you're curious, we will pull up an analysis specifically for your specific clinic. Rental rates, vacancies, comp reports. Happy to prefer one of those cash flow analyses. Demographics, if you've been curious for your building, let alone if you own it or lease it. Market rates, traffic patterns, those sorts of things can go a long way. If you're curious to see what other tenants in the area are paying as well, we'll set up a Teams call and go through that with you. We've got some great analyses here about other comp reports, market rates. When was the last time it was bought or sold? What do we know about the new owner? The more data you have, the better. And we'll actually even go through the lease line by line with some highlights to make sure that we've got some good, tangible knowledge and best practices. So, as well as Trent, for doctors that are now thinking about this. So we will happy to do a complimentary lease review and rental rate analysis. So there's a quick button here that you can request it. And Trent, as we go to Q&A, some other closing thoughts, and specifically for doctors thinking about what's my clinic worth, thinking about some accounting concerns, what can they do and what can Aprio do to help support them?
First thing I'd offer to have a conversation with anyone to discuss their upcoming transition, planning for that. I encourage folks to invest in a basic valuation. Any point in your career, we're seeing 30-year-olds beginning to sell to DSOs. Do you know your value? We're seeing 60-year-olds saying, I want to sell in 5 years. Do you know your value? Last thing I would say is, how often are you meeting with your practice financial advisor? Once a year doesn't cut it. You need a regular meeting to know what's driving that cash flow, driving that profitability. Look at those numbers. Be glad to help you do that.
And already, 100% I've already said yes to some more information and to connect with your team, Trent.
Yeah.
So on the valuation front, the big one is, and one of the things we haven't really touched on, but we can touch on, I see one of the questions touched on it here is death, disability, those sorts of things.
Mm,
Trent, what are some key things, knowing that COVID's happened, knowing that when the doctor passes away, the impact of the saleability and that emergency exit becomes and can become devastating. What are some key tidbits and other pieces that doctors can do today beyond the wills and estate planning and some of the basic insurance? What are some other pieces they can do that, heaven forbid, they do pass away? It can lead to a quick and effective valuation and or sale because every day patients are going down the street and they're not coming back.
that's right. First thing is prepare for that moment by having a valuation, talking to the person who will be handling your estate. And even if you're not passed away, but you're disabled and unable to be in the capacity to continue to treat patients, who's going to take care of that practice in your absence? Who understands and has the authority to execute a transaction, put it on the market, contact an attorney, contact a real estate agent, all the things that's going to have to be done. Maybe the real estate gets sold, maybe it's where have you documented that for all those next decision? We kind of call it the emergency plan. Break glass in an emergency, have that plan together. Put it somewhere where it's known. Accumulate data on a regular basis to update that plan and verbalize it with someone so that another party understands where that data is and how they can act on it.
Yeah, it's interesting. I did a presentation with a client, Dr. Jordan Soul, who we did on Oral Health Magazine. And what he did, because he, in his younger days, his partner had passed away very suddenly. And he sort of promised to his family, etc., that, hey, I will not let this happen to you. I'll help to be a little more prepared, etc. And literally, funny you mention that, in the top drawer, it's that proverbial if I die, break glass. And what he does is he gets a practice valuation done every 5 years. He had us advise him and help to create the lease to separate his real estate corp from the practice corp. And basically, here's the contact numbers. Honey, if I die, right? Here's Trent's number for getting this thing on the market fast, right? Here's Eric's number in terms of helping to deal with the
Mm-hmm.
lease assignment, etc. And right, put it on the market tomorrow because right, what we always want to avoid is do I have to sell my building and my practice together for less? Does it have to bundle it? Right?
Yeah.
And is it separated? Right? Are you paying yourself rent or not? Right? Is the real estate in your practice corporation? Right? Is it in a spouse's name, etc.? These are, right, if you don't make the right choices, These can be an absolute mess for your CPA, etc. And there could be a massive amount of gains or other potentially unnecessary tax at those pivotal points. So a little extra tax planning there can go a long, long way.
When we do that for clients and build that plan, you can see a sigh of relief. They're now comfortable knowing it's somewhere. The family knows it, their attorney knows it, whoever they've asked to play in that role, the data is all there. I really want to encourage folks to take that next step. Put that plan together.
Perfect. So on that note, again, for some updated 33% owned. So maybe Trent, just touch on that for a second, or for the doctors thinking of potentially buying the real estate down the line. What are some key tales of woe, or just, what are some key advice to do? Structuring, who buys it, who owns it? Do you pay yourself rent? Do you not? Is it high? Is it low? Obviously, it depends, but for doctors who do own or are thinking of owning their real estate, Trent, what are some big gotchas or pearls that you can share this evening?
Do not put real estate inside a corporation. I want to go over that and I'll say it in Latin. Do not put real estate inside a corporation. It's starting out with a bad mistake that'll only get worse. Reason being, you're going to have corporate taxes on the sale down the road, and that's not good. Second thing, owning real estate has a lot to do with your tax-driven decision process. Understand that when you hold that personally, how income is going to flow from the practice into the into your hands. Make the most of the deduction. Don't just set it up and hope that it works out. Third, you might consider your spouse to be a partner in that real estate. That's a good investment. They may be able to collect a management fee, which may be able to be qualify them for a retirement plan. So the cascade effect of tax decisions is not just, am I going to own my real estate? It's going to be, am I going to own it and then make decisions that will continue to bring a good investment mindset and a good reward for it. Does that make sense?
Bang on. Yeah, no, great point, especially. Good. We'll give another second for any additional Q&As. Um, Anything else in terms of, estate planning or key things to do for the doctors that are 5 years out, right? Let that be wills and estate planning. Let that be some additional tax planning type piece for that 5 year out, because I think that's roughly 80% of those joining. Any final tidbits for them?
Understand what your net cash flow would be if you sold your practice today. Then understand what you can do to increase that net cash flow if you sell your practice in 5 years. I want you to do a mock sale. In other words, walk through it with all of your advisors. If I sold for this number today, what would my takeaway be? Now, as you're preparing for the next 5 years, Eric's gone over it well tonight, the impact of leasing. If you own your own real estate, you can still have those same issues as the landlord. Are you going to be holding that real estate long term? If so, how will you structure it for the tenant so it's advantageous for both of you? From an estate side, if you're close enough to be considering a sale in the next 5 years, what will that impact be on your estate if you were to pass before that 5 year mark? If that sale is not handled correctly, it could trigger other tax consequences that you're not prepared for or your heirs are not prepared for, such as you have debt on your practice and the proceeds, which you're going to first pay taxes, then cannot pay the debt off and you're leaving your estate insolvent.
And I think in closing, all the hard work you're doing, right? All the things you're worried about today, right? Might that turn into an infection? Is there going to be a comeback? Is that crown going to hold? What all the worry of the staff is, geez, I lost a hygienist, all the stuff you're worried about to earn a living, let alone build a great exit. I think hopefully the biggest takeaway is it doesn't take much to pierce and dramatically impact that eventual practice sale proceeds. So the
Hmm.
key things to do in at least 5 years prior is to build as much as possible, watching Star Wars with my boys recently, right? Putting a protective force field around those practice sale proceeds as early and often. And that can be the lease, that can be the tax planning, that can be the assignment provisions, etc., and looking at it through the eyes of the buyer. So, uh, Trent, final words?
Yeah, George Patton is a great American hero and someone I enjoy reading about. One of my favorite Patton quotes is, "Don't take chances, take calculated risk." And as you think through your practice transition, I would encourage you, don't take chances with it. Whether you're 20 years out, or you're 5 years out, or you're 5 minutes, take calculated risk because you're prepared.
Well said. General Patton. Love it. On that note, thank you very much, everyone, for your time. Greatly appreciated. Trent, Ken, thank you so much for your time.
Well, thank you for the
Uh,
chance to be here.
Greatly appreciated. Thank you, Patterson. Thank you to the behind the scenes, Allison, Lisa on the Patterson side. Thank you for the Navigate Business Services. There is a fantastic wealth of providers such as
Mhm.
Aprio and Cirrus,
Mhm.
and another dozen of them that are specifically there to help drive profitability, reduce risk, and to help make life easier and take that stress off your shoulders. You're not
Yeah.
alone in all of this. Find yourself some great dental specific partners, and really appreciate everyone's time. Thank you so much and have a fantastic evening. Look forward to being in touch. Thanks, guys. Have a great day.